I was in my 30s, and I didn't drink. I moved to a neighborhood out on the island where they had parties every Saturday. And I started to drink with them. Before I knew it, I was hung up on this stuff. I couldn't believe it. Same with Smokey.
They danced in living room. They laughed in black and white. They made the world believe in joy again just by stepping onto the same screen. But behind the polished smiles of the Dick Van Dyke Show, behind the laughs, pratfalls, and picture-perfect chemistry, there lived two wounded hearts. Dick Van Dyke and Mary Tyler Moore, a duo so naturally electric. Millions assumed their connection must have been real, and maybe, in some secret way, it was. On screen, they were America's sweethearts. Rob and Laura Petrie, the couple every viewer wished they could be. But when the cameras stopped rolling, both carried private pain that never quite faded. Dick, always full of laughter and mischief, was quietly battling alcoholism, a dependency that started innocently at neighborhood parties and spiraled into something that consumed his spirit. Off camera, he wasn't always the cheerful man fans adored. He was haunted by guilt, especially over an affair that would eventually destroy his decades-long marriage. Mary, for her part, wore grace like a second skin. But behind the charm and poise, she was grappling with enormous heartache, family addiction, her son's tragic death, and a lifelong struggle with type 1 diabetes. Her health battles were constant, often invisible. She once joked that her famous smile was a professional tool, but sometimes it was also a mask. Still, in each other, they found comfort. If not romance, then a rare creative intimacy. Their connection was built on timing, trust, and talent. Dick once admitted he had a crush on Mary, and she later confessed, "The amazing thing is, we never had an affair. I always thought it was a terrible waste." Castmates often wondered if something more was going on, but both chose professionalism over passion. Or perhaps it wasn't a choice at all, just circumstance and caution dancing too closely to risk anything more. Together, they created magic, but apart, they survived their own storm, alone, but forever linked by a show, a legacy, and a connection that never truly went away. And it was, just not in the way you think. This is not just the story of two stars. It's about missed moments, private pain, and the kind of bond that flickers quietly behind the curtain, only visible to those who know where to look. Because what Dick Van Dyke and Mary Tyler Moore shared went beyond lines on a script or scenes rehearsed under studio light. Their connection was forged in vulnerability. Two performers rising to fame while quietly crumbling behind the scenes. They made millions laugh, all while nursing silent heartbreaks that only deepened with time. Dick struggled with addiction for decades, hiding the effects behind his charming smile and impeccable timing. Alcohol numbed the pressure of fame, but it also distanced him from his wife, his children, and maybe even from the chance to reach out to someone like Mary, who was quietly enduring her own storms. Mary, despite her on-screen perfection, was no stranger to pain. She lived through loss after loss, her sister to addiction, her son to a tragic gun accident, and her own health declining steadily from the toll of diabetes. She once said, "I've had to be brave when I didn't feel brave." And maybe Dick was the only co-star who ever truly understood what that meant. Their relationship was never defined by romance, but by something far more enduring: understanding, a shared resilience, a mutual admiration that refused to fade, even as life pulled them apart. You won't find their story in tabloids or tell-alls, but look closely in the way they laughed, the way they looked at each other on set, and you'll see a bond built not on headlines, but on humanity. Richard Wayne Van Dyke was born in the dusty quiet of West Plains, Missouri in 1925. His mother, Hazel, typed for a living, and his father sold cookies. When the Depression hit, they moved to Danville, Illinois, a place where everyone knew your name and radio shows echoed through the neighbor's wall. It was there, borrowing airwaves and dreaming in silence, that young Dick discovered his love for performance. At school, Dick was tall, skinny, and awkward, but he had a voice, a gift for mimicry, and a wild imagination. He thought he might become a minister. Then he joined the drama club and heard the first laugh of an audience. That was it. Heaven could wait. Meanwhile, across the country, Mary Tyler Moore was born in Brooklyn in 1936 into a strict Catholic home with deep Irish-American roots. Her father was a clerk, her mother a homemaker battling quiet, emotional struggles. The family dynamic was tight, traditional, and often tense. When Mary was just 8, the Moores uprooted their lives and moved to Los Angeles, encouraged by her uncle who worked in the film industry. That move would forever change the course of her destiny. Los Angeles was a different world, brighter, louder, and filled with opportunity. Mary enrolled in Catholic school and took up dancing with a fervor that quickly outpaced her peers. By her early teens, she was already gracing the covers of record albums, her fresh-faced beauty and graceful posture making her a natural in front of the camera. But acting came unexpectedly. Her first role wasn't even visible. She voiced a sultry, elusive secretary named Sam in Richard Diamond, Private Detective. Viewers only saw her legs and heard her voice. It was enough to spark curiosity in audiences and producers alike. Behind that early glamour, however, was a young woman already learning how to hide pain. Mary's family, though outwardly traditional, was internally troubled. Her mother battled alcoholism. Her sister Elizabeth later died tragically from a drug and alcohol overdose, and her brother would succumb to cancer. Mary bore witness to it all, quietly tucking away each scar. Still, she pressed on. Her resilience, steely beneath the surface, would define her career. She turned every setback into fuel. When she became pregnant in her teens, she was fired from her role as a dancing elf in Hot Point appliance commercial. But she kept going, taking odd jobs, modeling gigs, and tiny TV parts until finally landing the role that would make her a star, Laura Petrie. It's easy to remember Mary as poised and perfect, but she earned that grace through hard living and deep loss. Long before she was a household name, Mary Tyler Moore was a fighter, dancing through pain, smiling through sorrow, and never letting the world see the cracks beneath the shine. 2 kids, 2 coasts, both about to rewrite television history. In 1944, Dick Van Dyke tried to enlist as a pilot in the Army Air Forces, driven by a sense of patriotic duty and the dream of soaring through the skies during World War II. But at 6 feet 1 inch and just 135 pounds, he fell short, literally, of the minimum weight requirement. Never one to give up easily, he devoured bananas, drank gallons of water, and stuffed himself with anything that could tip the scale. Eventually, he gained enough weight to qualify, but the sky never called him the way the stage did. After beginning pilot training, Van Dyke quickly realized he had a fear of flying, an ironic twist for a man later famous for flying cars in Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. Rather than wash out, he was reassigned to the Special Services, a military unit tasked with morale and entertainment. There, he found his calling. He started off painting sets and doing backstage work, but his natural charm and comedic timing soon earned him a microphone. He became a radio announcer and later a performer in troop shows that traveled across the U.S. to entertain soldiers. These weren't just variety acts. They were lifelines for men facing war. Dick's goofy voices, rubbery expressions, and improvisational genius were a hit. The military gave him more than just a stage. It gave him discipline, confidence, and purpose. It taught him how to hold a room, how to pivot when things go wrong, and how to entertain under pressure. Years later, he would credit those formative military years for shaping the performer he became. After the war, Dick returned home, no longer just a lanky, small-town kid. He was sharper, more confident, and deeply aware of the power of laughter. His transition to show business wasn't accidental. It was the next step in a journey that began not on a Broadway stage or a television set, but under canvas tents and makeshift stages, where joy was the rarest and most valuable currency. From the Army's Special Services to the hearts of millions, Dick Van Dyke learned that sometimes, when fate closes one door, like the cockpit of a plane, it opens another, far grander stage. After the war, Dick walked into a Danville radio station and asked for a job. They said yes. He became a morning show host known for hilarious voices and character. On April Fool's Day, he convinced the entire town a UFO had landed. The police were not amused, but Dick had arrived. He soon partnered with Phil Erickson to form Eric and Van, the Merry Mutes, a silent comedy duo that mimed to old records, switched roles mid-act, and brought down the house. 5 shows a night, every night. By 1951, they had their own show in Atlanta. Then, Phil quit. Dick pressed on. Mary Tyler Moore's first big break came playing a pair of legs. Literally. She was Sam, the never-seen secretary in Richard Diamond, Private Detective, but that voice, that wit, stuck. Then came the moment that would define both of their lives. In 1961, the Dick Van Dyke Show needed a wife for Rob Petrie, the lovable, bumbling comedy writer. Mary was only 24. Dick was 36. He didn't think she was right. Too young, he said. Carl Reiner, the show's creator, replied, "Trust me, nobody will notice." He was right. Audiences didn't just notice. They fell in love. Their chemistry was lightning in a bottle. Laura and Rob Petrie weren't just TV's favorite couple. They were TV's most believable couple. Fans asked, are they married in real life? They weren't, but they could have been if life were a little less complicated. From the very first episode of the Dick Van Dyke Show, the connection between Dick and Mary was palpable. They didn't just deliver lines, they danced through them, finishing each other's thoughts with a rhythm that felt instinctive. Off camera, it was the same. They laughed easily, trusted each other implicitly, and when one stumbled, the other was always there to catch them. Producers were nervous about casting Mary at first. She was only 24, 11 years younger than Dick, and still relatively unknown. But once she stepped into Laura Petrie's capri pants and shared the screen with Dick, those doubts vanished. The age gap melted away under the weight of their timing, warmth, and mutual respect. Behind the scenes, there were whispers. Castmates noticed the energy between them. They looked at each other like they'd known each other forever. One crew member later recalled, even Dick admitted that Mary reminded him of someone he could have fallen in love with. If only their lives hadn't already been committed elsewhere. There was no affair, no scandal, just a quiet what if that hovered in the background of their years working together. As Mary later joked, the amazing thing is, we never had an affair. I always thought it was a terrible waste. Dick, in his memoir, called her the most naturally gifted woman I've ever worked with. Their off-screen relationship was rooted in a kind of rare creative intimacy, deep trust without romance, affection without entitlement. They made each other better, sharper, funnier, and both of them knew it. Behind the scenes, their connection was obvious. Cast members and crew recalled the way they finished each other's sentences, often without realizing it. Between takes, they would improvise scenes that never made it to air, just to make each other laugh. One director said, it was like watching Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers rehearse, fluid, flawless, full of something unsaid. But perhaps they knew they couldn't afford to cross the line. Both were in complicated relationships. Mary, navigating young motherhood and a fading marriage. Dick, battling alcoholism and eventually falling into an affair that would dissolve his own union. They each carried private storm, and maybe that's why they never let their bond veer into romance. They respected each other too much to risk what they had. Still, the tension lingered, not as friction, but as longing. And decades later, when Dick reminisced, he didn't speak with regret, only tenderness. Mary wasn't just a co-star. She was the path not taken, the comfort he cherished, and the partner who always knew the right line, even if it was never spoken aloud. Their story is not one of passion unchained, but of love restrained, and for that very reason, unforgettable. Their connection may have been limited to the screen, but its authenticity never faded. It was a performance, but one that came heartbreakingly close to something real. Behind the laughter, tension simmered. Rose Marie, who played Sally Rogers, felt her role shrinking as Mary's popularity exploded. Off-screen, Dick and Mary respected each other deeply, but the air between them held something unspoken. An attraction, maybe. A question never asked. Mary would later joke, the amazing thing is, we never had an affair. I always thought it was a terrible waste. Success was sweet, but life was bitter behind the curtain. Dick Van Dyke was fighting a demon in a bottle. At first, alcohol was just a social lubricant, but soon it consumed him. By the 1970s, the man America saw dancing through sitcoms was falling apart inside, angry, isolated, ashamed. In 1972, he checked himself into a hospital for 3 weeks and got sober. Smoking was another battle. He chewed Nicorette gum for over a decade, but the worst came in 2006, when a mysterious drumming in his head kept him from sleeping for 7 years. No doctor could explain it. He suspected his titanium dental implants. Nothing was confirmed, but he kept going, always. Mary's battles were darker still. In 1969, she was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. She kept acting, kept smiling, but behind the scenes, her health was unraveling. She lost her sister to addiction, her brother to cancer. Her only son, Richard, died in a gun accident in 1980 at just 24. Ironically, her most famous film, Ordinary People, about a grieving mother, was released just weeks later. She would never be the same. Dick stayed busy. Broadway, Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, Mary Poppins. He was Bert, the chimney sweep with the worst Cockney accent in film history. So bad he even joked about, but people didn't care. He danced with penguins and won hearts worldwide. Mary redefined what a woman on TV could be. In The Mary Tyler Moore Show, she was single, working, funny, and fearless. It won 29 Emmys. She launched a production company with her second husband, Grant Tinker, but fame couldn't save her marriage. They divorced in 1981. Dick, meanwhile, was living a double life. Married to his childhood sweetheart, Margie Willett, he began an affair with actress Michelle Triola in 1976. They were together for 30 years until her death in 2009. Dick confessed he felt guilty every day. In 2012, at age 86, he married Arlene Silver, a makeup artist 46 years younger. It was pure joy. "He keeps me young," he said, and in many ways, she saved him. They reunited in the gin game in 2003. Two elderly nursing home residents battling over cards and past regrets. It was art imitating life. The chemistry was still there. The spark still flickered, but nothing more came of it. There were no confessions, no late life reconnection. Maybe they had loved each other. Maybe they never could. When Mary died in 2017, Dick said nothing for weeks. Then quietly, he told the world, "She changed me more than any woman ever had." The sting was soft, but it was real. Dick never stopped moving. In his 90s, he danced on The Masked Singer. He appeared in Mary Poppins Return. He sang at Lakers game. At 98, he won an Emmy for Days of Our Lives, proving he could still surprise us. He wrote books on aging, recorded jazz albums, and shared joy in viral videos with Arlene. At 99, he's still dancing. Mary left behind a legacy too deep to measure. Her strength, her fashion, her bravery in facing disease, heartbreak, and politics. She didn't always agree with feminism, but she always stood up for women. She called herself a centrist libertarian and never let anyone define her beliefs for her. So, what was the real story between Dick Van Dyke and Mary Tyler Moore? Were they lovers who missed their moment? Just friends with sparks they never lit? Or simply kindred spirits forever linked by timing and tenderness? Maybe it doesn't matter. What matters is what they gave the world. Laughter when we needed it, light in our darkest rooms, and a model of love. Not the kind that burns fast and fades, but the kind that lingers in your heart for decades. They weren't Rob and Laura. They were Dick and Mary. More complicated, more broken, more beautiful. They didn't end up together, but they never drifted apart in spirit. Because sometimes the greatest love stories are the ones that never happen. They just stay with us. Their bond was built on timing, trust, and something deeper, recognition. Mary saw in Dick a warmth and safety she rarely found in her turbulent life. Dick saw in Mary not just a partner in comedy, but a kindred spirit, a woman who could match him beat for beat, laugh for laugh, heart for heart. Even decades later, when they reunited on stage for the Gin Game in 2003, the magic was still there. Audiences could feel it. They weren't just watching two icons. They were witnessing something intimate, something unresolved. Dick nearly turned the role down due to arthritis, but Mary encouraged him. Just like always, he made it easier for him to be great. After Mary passed away in 2017, Dick didn't release a grand statement. Instead, his tributes came in quiet interview, where his voice softened and his eyes misted. "She changed me," he said, "more than any woman I've ever known." Their love story wasn't written in tabloids or sealed with a kiss. It was written in glances, laughter, and unspoken understanding. And while the world watched Rob and Laura fall in love, something quieter and perhaps more profound was unfolding just out of frame, between two souls who met in the spotlight and left an eternal glow behind.